Welcome back, everybody, to this week's episode of the Be'in podcast. Today's guest was Rabbi Yamin Goldsmith from Sha'alavim Women's Seminary, and our discussion today was really enlightening. It was broken down into two categories. The first half was about Ahavat Yisrael and helping us get to the point where we are able to love the other Jews around us despite what they look like. And then the second half of the episode was about the relationship between all the seminaries in Israel and also the institutions in America. We kind of unpacked that in a very unique way. So I highly recommend sticking around for that ending of the episode. Without further ado, it's time to jump into my conversation with Rabbi Goldsmith and myself. Enjoy. Welcome to the Israel Gap Year Be'in podcast. I'm your host, Avi Proctor, and in each episode, we get Be'in in depth into the remarkable lives of individuals in Israel who dedicate themselves to inspiring the next generation of Klal Yisrael. Okay, we are ready to roll, and I am joined in the virtual Israel Gap Year studio right now by Rabbi Yamin Goldsmith. Rabbi Goldsmith, it is great to see you. Happens to be we're filming this on Hanukkah, so Hanukkah Sameach, and welcome.
Shalom Aleichem, Avi. Thank you. Yishar Koach for the opportunity. Thank you for the opportunity, and Yishar Koach for what you do. It's really a great zechus to be a small part of what you do.
I really appreciate it, and the fact that you are taking your time to jump on this podcast with me and Hakar Shatov obviously is always important. So just thank you for taking the time.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. So obviously today's topic, based off of people clicking on this episode, is going to be about Ahavat Yisrael, the Jewish people, things related to the seminary space. But before we talk about any of that, I'm sure there are people that are listening to this that are like, okay, who is Rabbi Goldsmith? So even for myself, give me and the listeners a little bit of a background into to who you are, how did you get here today, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Wow. I am originally from Chicago. My literally grandparents on both sides came to Chicago from Poland. I lived there till I was in 8th grade, and then my family moved to Silver Spring, Maryland. I grew up there. Wonderful experience. I eventually, then after high school, I went to Sha'alavim. I went to Yeshivat Sha'alavim. I learned there for 2 years. And after my second year, I joined the army through the Sha'alavim Hesder program as a Chayal Boded, as a lone soldier. I went back to Yeshiva University. I got a bachelor's from Yeshiva University. I got smicha. I got a master's degree in public administration, and also Baruch Hashem, along the way I met my wonderful wife. I also worked in NCSY for a number of years. I was the assistant principal. I was a Rebbe and then assistant principal in Yeshivat Frisch, in the Frisch School in New Jersey. And I also worked for 3 years in SIR Elementary School as the associate principal of Limudei Kodesh, and our family made Aliyah then, and that was 20 years ago. My first year in Israel, I did not work in a seminary. I was the assistant principal of an Israeli boys yeshiva high school, and I loved it. It was a great experience for me. And I always say that working in a seminary is identical to working in an Israeli boys yeshiva high school, except that was Israeli and this is for chutznikim. That was for boys and this is for females. That was high school and this is seminary. But other than that, it's identical. And then 20 years ago, Hodel Hashem Kitov, I became the Menahel and the Rosh Midrashah of Sha'alavim for Women. And I've been here ever since, Baruch Hashem. More recently, I'm not the Menahel now. Rabbi Gershon Turetsky is the Menahel. Michelle Elmaleh is the assistant director. I'm the Rosh Midrashah at Sha'alavim for Women, and here we are.
That is a phenomenal background, and if I had to go back in time, like 25 or so years ago before you made Aliyah, and I would have showed you what you're doing today and told you this is where you're going to be in 25 years, what would you have told me?
Wow, that's a great question. It depends on if you're asking geographically or professionally. Because geographically, yes, it's all in Hashem's hands. But the plan was when I went back to YU after the army, I said I'm coming back to Eretz Yisrael. I did only date girls that wanted to make Aliyah, and so that was the plan all along. I was expecting it to be a little earlier, but Hashem has His ways, and thank God. So geographically, yeah, but B'chazdei Hashem, I was hoping very much to be in Eretz Yisrael. To work in a seminary, I wouldn't believe you for a moment. I love it, but I always kind of saw myself in the world of high school or older elementary school. And it came my way really with Hashem's blessings. He knew better than me what was good for me, and it did work out. But that was not the original plan or expectation, I should say.
I can imagine. And doing this for over 20 years, my other question is, what gets you to do this again and again? Meaning when somebody starts a job, sometimes at the beginning it's super exciting, it's awesome, it's a great time, but then like 20 years later, you don't have that same vibrancy. But when I see you in person and I see your videos on the Israel Gap, your pages every single year, you have the same energy, you're super excited. Like what has kept that alive feeling inside of you for 20 years?
Wow. These are great questions. I think
throw them at you.
Yeah, I think I gotta pay you for a therapy session here. I do tell my students, and I believe it from the bottom of my heart, that if I didn't grow, then I would look for another place to go. In other words, if I didn't feel that I myself was growing personally in my family all the time, I think it would be time for me to leave. And so I'm amazed at the people that I meet, at the students that I get a chance to learn with and to learn from. I think that's, for me, that seems to be what gets me out of bed, and it's very exciting. It's funny because a lot of teachers, or a lot of people, I should say, I would imagine, if they go on vacation. So it's great to be on vacation. I also enjoy it. Don't get me wrong, but sort of towards the end of vacation, people sometimes, often, I would imagine, have a sort of knot in their stomach. Oh, I got to go back. There's this old, trope, I would imagine, in the world, and certainly, when I grew up, that, first of all, you grow up in the United States, so we didn't work on Sundays, so it's always the Monday blues, and thank God it's Friday, and Wednesday is hump day, you're getting close to the weekend. It's almost like your whole life is avoiding work. And again, I certainly am a human being, I certainly enjoy breaks, but in general, when a vacation is over, when the summer is over, it's no butterflies. It's literally excitement to get back to doing what I really love doing and enjoy doing, and I feel like I have the zechus to do as a shlichus, as being sort of a messenger from HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
It's so special, and the lives of the many Talmidot of yours that you've affected, I'm sure they would agree. And actually, before we came on here, the promotional video, because as we're filming this right now, there's a Sha'alavim for Women campaign going on, and one of the girls that was interviewed in the video, she said, every single year you feel like this is the first year that these teachers have been teaching all these students, because you come back with the same vibrancy and everything. And it's funny because I was part of that video, but I certainly didn't edit it, and I certainly didn't see every piece. I saw that for the first time also, and that she's an amazing student, and it's really, what a bracha. I have this expression that I share with my students called CW. CW means chill-worthy. And in other words, that's worthy of chills. I was so powerful to hear that. And the goal is to be inspired by them. And if we, as teachers, Rebbeim, Mechanchim, if we're able to do that in reverse, it's a great zechus. I love that. CW. I'm gonna have to add that to my vocabulary. There we go.
If we're gonna, I will add though, as long as we're talking about that, things are chill-worthy. A Dvar Torah, a story, a message, a Shabbaton, a Kumzitz. But the trick is that you have to make it. I can't wait for somebody else to do it to me. It has to come from me. So anyway, that's not exactly what we're talking about. But as long as we're talking about CW, that's the message I feel.
There we go. And I'm gonna try to add that to my vocabulary. And on the topic of what we're discussing today, that's perfect. We're gonna channel right into that. And as I mentioned in the introduction, we're gonna talk about Ahavat Yisrael. And that is a struggle that everybody has, including myself and you, and we spoke about this before we came today. My first question to you is obviously on an ideal level, we all want to be loving every single Jew. Everyone knows that. But why is it so hard? Why is it a struggle for Jews that sometimes they obviously care about Am Yisrael? They know that, okay, this Jew next to me who I'm having a hard time getting along with, they are my brother, but it's still hard. So where does that come from and why is it so hard?
I want to say, and I have to say that I don't consider myself an expert in any way in this field. I have to say, I'm not sure that that's a good thing to say on the podcast, but I'm not an expert. I'm honest and open to say that I am working on it. I've been working on it for a long time. If any of my friends are watching this or listening to this, I'll ask them not to share, but they may remember me younger, and I did not work on it then, and I did not in any way. I don't excel really at anything, but certainly not at that. But at some point in my life, I felt missing, lacking, not happy and comfortable with myself, and it was something that I've worked on over the years, and so I'm happy to share that journey with you. As you know, together. You said you struggle with it. I certainly struggle with it, struggled and continue to struggle with it. Anyway, that's a long introduction to say I'm not 100% sure why we struggle with it. Why should it be hard? You said on paper, everyone wants to love everybody. Everyone knows that Sinas Chinam destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. Ahavas Chinam is going to rebuild it. You know, I'm going to love everybody except for him, except for her. And I think, at least for me, I think that part of the struggle is normal, natural, and that is in order for me to sometimes, and I don't think this is a good thing, but it happens normally, in order for me to live my life the way I understand it, in my hashkafa, with my rebbeim and my decisions, I have to consciously or subconsciously say that I'm right and you're not right. There was a comedian many years ago who said, did you ever notice that when you're driving, so anybody who is ahead of you, is a slowpoke, and anybody who passes you is the speed demon. And I thought that was very funny. In other words, I'm the only one who knows how to drive. Everybody else is crazy. I'm the only one. And unfortunately, I think that translates into our hashkafos as well. And so in order for me to say I'm right, I have to say that you're not right. And so I have to criticize. And of course that's a mistake. And of course that's not a good thing. And of course it's not healthy. But I think that there's a certain element of truth to that. If I could share very quickly, there's a gorgeous idea from Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky in the beginning of Sefer Bamidbar. In the beginning of Sefer Bamidbar, when Bnei Yisrael are taught about how to camp and how to travel in the Midbar, and everyone has their flags and everyone has their location and their marching orders. And you'll notice in the beginning of Sefer Bamidbar, that's in the second year after they left Mitzrayim. And Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky asks, in his Emes Yaakov, he asks, why did it take a year and plus? How come it took a year plus out of Mitzrayim for Bnei Yisrael to get their flags? They should have gotten it 2.5 minutes after they left Mitzrayim. Kriyas Yamsuf, Yehuda, you stand over here with this flag, and Yisachar over here, etc. And so Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky said that would have been a mistake, because flags represent each shevet's and each person's strengths, and that's very special. But if they got their flags then it would be a great competition among the Shvatim. I'm better than you, I contributed more than you, I do more than you, you're either too lazy or you're a fanatic, I'm the only one who knows what's going on correctly. But what had to happen first? The Mishkan had to be built first. Once the Mishkan was built first, and we are all surrounding that Mishkan, focused on the Mishkan, serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, recognizing HaKadosh Baruch Hu, recognizing we're all on the same team, then I can indeed say, we're on the same team, I'm going to play shortstop, you're going to be catcher. If we were all shortstops, we'd lose. If we were all catchers, we'd lose. You need what you need. I need what I need, and we can work together. That's the goal. Halavai, I and all of us should be zoche to live to that. But I think what happens is sometimes we put the flags before the Mishkan. And we say, well, I'm better than you. And I have to say that. Or else it's going to be hard for me to wake up in the morning. And unfortunately, that's a terrible thing. And perhaps that's part of the issue.
That is a beautiful vort. I've never heard that before, and I love it when I film these podcasts. One of the most beneficial things for myself is I get to hear new Torah from all different people. So I definitely appreciate that one. And on the topic of, yes, in an ideal world we want to realize we're all on the same team, and then once we do, we're rolling together. And speaking about current events, what has happened in the past 2 years, the war has literally brought Am Yisrael and the Jewish people across the world to make them feel in a way that, because essentially the Jewish people were forced a little bit in the past 2 years to realize that we're all on the same team at the end of the day. But I know you and I were speaking about this before we came on the podcast of the war is definitely affected in terms of the way you see Ahavat Yisrael and unity, and obviously the Jewish people. So how did it change and shape your view a little more in the past 2 years?
100%. So as I said, and I'm being very honest, I'm working on it regularly. Very often when I teach these kinds of ideas, I say, and I really mean that I'm talking to myself, and you're welcome to eavesdrop. So, and I've been progressing, I hope, and sometimes regressing, but hopefully progressing in general. And then October 7th came, and as you said, it brought the world, the Jewish world together beautifully, and painfully. Pain brings achdus. Unfortunately, it's too bad that we need that sometimes. For me personally, I also felt great achdus, and it was also I caught myself regressing in that area. My wife and I are blessed with 4 sons and 2 sons-in-law, and 5. They all served Klal Yisrael and served all over Gaza and Syria and Lebanon and Yehuda v'Shomron. And when we think about, and as parents, and we are 2, my wife and I are 2 of thousands and thousands and thousands of people. This is not a unique story whatsoever. This is not a unique story. But with thousands and thousands of people experience what we experienced of sending a child off to war. One of my kids literally on October 7th, literally Shabbos, Yontif, ran home, changed into, like thousands of others, ran home, changed into his uniform. We don't know what's going on. And I had run home from shul a tad behind him, and he got on his uniform, and a car came to pick him up. And as I got home, he's already in the car. And the window's open, I'm saying goodbye to him, I give him a kiss, and I literally stick my hands in the window, and as the car is inching away, I'm giving him a bracha, Shabbos bracha, so to speak. Who knows when we're going to see him? I'm going to say honestly, who knows if we're going to see him again? And again and again and again, those experiences that we've heard a million times and we've all experienced, going to sleep for 2 years with our phones on, and the fears. Again, I don't want to spend too much time on this because again, there's nothing unique about this. This is what we all felt. In our shul, just our shul, they made a list of children serving in Gaza, serving up north, serving everywhere, and they came up with 300 plus names. So it was incredibly inspiring and scary. It was his Jewish history in a nutshell. The great zechus of go tell your great-great-grandparents in Auschwitz that your children and your husbands and your brothers and your fathers are going to be serving in Tzahal with Lashon HaKodesh on their uniform. It's outrageous to think that. So it was a great zechus and great fear. Again, I don't want to spend too much time, but fear of not only chas v'shalom, the worst thing that could happen to your child or your husband, etc. And it did, unfortunately, to many, many dear, dear, dear friends. Our children were next to people that unfortunately gave their lives like Kiddush Hashem. And that's not the only fear, of course, the fear of are they going to get injured, and the fear are they going to get injured in their mental health as well. And then you also think about the children of the soldiers, our grandchildren who have their own challenges. And, one of our kids was serving in Miluim forever and ever and ever. And one time he had 12 hours to go home, to get a shower, say hello to his wife, say hello to his kids. And he said, I can't do it because 12 hours is too much of a tease. I can't go home. And so he just didn't come home because, again, all the mental health challenges that might happen and all the physical challenges and Chalila worse. And with all that, I found myself, if we're talking about Ahavat Yisrael, I found myself being very challenged by people who were not serving. And I don't believe that I did anything externally to show that challenge, but if I'm honest with myself, and if I was videotaping myself for 2 years, I am sure that subconsciously it came out inadvertently. And I'm very upset at that, and I was very embarrassed by that. And I clouded it by accident in politics. I clouded it in history, even hashkafa and halacha. And at some point, I said to myself, this is my avoda. I made certain strides in my life to get there, and it really set me back. And I'm sorry I took so long in this one question, but it was a very painful. It is still a challenge for me, but I've been working hard. Not only to feel more love, but also to share more love, especially since then.
I can't even imagine what it's like being a parent when you have, your 4 children yourself, as you mentioned, and then you have 2 son-in-laws, and you got to keep your phone on. And that story that you said, even with the car inching forward, and you're trying to give your son a blessing, it's not easy, and to go through that is probably indescribable to a certain extent. And on the topic of having a hard time loving the people that were necessarily not serving, I know you did something very unique, which was going into a very religious neighborhood during the war. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, yeah. In general, what I felt I needed personally, and I'm going to use the word selfishly, I felt that I needed to change my outlook. It was not healthy. Again, I don't think I did anything externally. I really, really hope I didn't do anything externally, but I didn't love the people that I should be loving. And so the specific story that you're talking about is that it was in Yom HaZikaron. Yom HaZikaron, I always, for many years, I go to Har Herzl. Har Herzl, the military cemetery in Yerushalayim. There's many in Israel, but the largest one in Israel, where unfortunately, people we know are buried there, and but on Yom HaZikaron, right at, a few months after the war began, I and together with somebody else went into a Haredi neighborhood, and we had these cards printed out that just said, please say Tehillim for Chayalei Tzahal, and I did it for me. I did it for me. I hope I also did it for the Chayalim. They need our tefillos. Still today, they need our tefillos. But I did it for me. I wanted to give and to share. And so in this community, on the siren, I stood still. And I want to tell you that it was an unbelievable experience for me personally. I handed out these little cards to people. I only handed out to men. I don't think the women would have appreciated a guy giving them anything and talking to them, but I only gave to the men. And every man I gave looked externally, I don't know, I'm not God, I don't know, but externally they looked like they belonged to the Haredi community. And I had, I had 200 cards to give out. I know exactly how many people I spoke to, because I spoke to 230 people. Because I gave out all my cards, plus 30 people declined to take the cards. Now, out of the 230, 229, that's not a round number, I'm not exaggerating, literally 229 people either took them with simcha. I got hugs in the middle of, it's Ramat Beit Shemesh Bet. In the middle of Ramat Beit Shemesh Bet, I got hugs from a few guys. Men, I never met them before, they're Jews. I got handshakes. One guy took it and said, thank you, but I don't need your card, because I say Tehillim for them every single day. 229. One person declined, so 29 declined, maybe silently declined, with a little nod or whatever, but not in any way, God forbid, confrontational. One guy was, in my mind, a little bit harsh, a little bit strong, and declined in a very strong way that was very hard to hear. But those statistics are undeniable. I mean, I'm going to choose the 229 people who maybe they don't, we don't dress the same, and we don't always say the same things, but we agree on 612 and a half mitzvos. That's real achdus. And I walked away extremely uplifted, and it really helped me change some of my philosophy. I tried my best to give rides to people who need rides in that from every community, including that community. Again, I think it's the giving, and when we schmooze, it's all. I've never had a negative experience on any ride that I give to people. We call them tramps here. Don't take tramps, but in the local neighborhood, people do it here. Only literally, except for one person, and there's always one person. We're going to go by the extremes in a group, by the outliers. It was a very powerful experience for me personally.
That is really, really cool, honestly. And obviously it's special, but like the fact that you had the courage to go into Ramat Bet, which for people that are listening to this that had never been there before, next time you come to Ramat Beit Shemesh, go to Ramat Bet, and then hopefully you'll understand exactly what you're talking about. But the fact that you spoke to that many people, how long did it take you, by the way?
Wow, it took, surprisingly not as long as you'd think, because people took. Literally, when you run out, you run out. And people took. And maybe about 2 hours, 2.5 hours, a little less. It reminded me, and again, it reminded me and it helped me. We really are all Jews. We really are all surrounding the Mishkan. And again, we don't all do the same. And I'm going to say, I do have my own philosophy and my own family's hashkafa, and I do have my rebbeim, and we don't see eye to eye, but that doesn't mean that we can't see heart to heart.
That is a really good point. And that literally brings me to my next question, which was, obviously, ideally, we all need to realize we're Jewish people. Yeah, you might be wearing this on the outside and I might be wearing this, and we might see a little bit differently. But at the end of the day, if somebody's listening to this right now and is acknowledging that, hey, I am struggling with loving every single Jew, especially the ones that don't look the same as me, because people argue about hashkafic things and this and that and get very caught up in those things. But what would your advice be to someone who's trying to work on their Ahavat Yisrael in a way where it's just like, okay, specifically the people that look and think exactly different than I do, that's where I could grow. What would your advice be?
So I'm going to say again, and I'm sorry to sound like a broken record, it's things that work for me. I'm no expert, and I'd love to hear other people's opinions. For me, I try to live a life where I believe that the only Jew who is a stranger is the Jew that you haven't said hello to yet. And if you haven't, there's an old joke about Jewish geography, which says that if two Jews are talking and they don't know anybody in common, it means you haven't spoken, for long enough time. And I would say that about this more. In other words, if you haven't found something that makes them unique, that makes them special, then you haven't been speaking long enough. And it's easier said than done. And I'm not great at it, but I try to when I speak to somebody, what makes you special? Why did Hashem choose to create you? The idea, and this is of course not my own idea, Rav Kook, or Rav Yitzchak Cohen Cook, the Ashkenazi chief rabbi of British Mandate Palestine. He died in 1935. His idea, his thinking was that, and many people quote this, that the day before you were born, God didn't need you in this world. But the day you were born, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, I need you. And for me to believe in myself that I literally can do something that Rav Moshe Feinstein could not do, Rabbi Kiva Eirkar could not do, the Chazon Ish couldn't do, Abaye and Rava couldn't do. I'm the only one who can do it. It's mind-boggling to think that. And if that's true about me, then my job is to recognize that it's true about you also. It's true about you. And if we're speaking about Rav Kook, I'm reminded now of a story that he said about himself, that he was criticized sometimes for being a little bit too nice to people who, we're not God. We don't, only God is the judge, but who don't externally seem to be observant currently of Torah and mitzvos. And so how could you be nice to them? You're just encouraging them. And he says, and this story really speaks to me, and I try, underline the word try, bold. I try to live by this. He said, if in 120 years I get to heaven, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that you, Rav Kook, you were nice to people that you were not supposed to be nice to. And because of that, if Hashem says, because of that, you were nice to people that you were not supposed to be nice to, because of that, I'm sending you to Gehenna. Rav Kook says that kind of Gehenna I could survive for an eternity. But if I change my lifestyle and I'm not nice to people because I don't know, and then I get to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in 120 years and he says to me, Rav Kook, you were not nice to the people you were supposed to be nice to, and because of that I'm sending you to Gehenna. Rav Kook says I couldn't survive that for even a second. And so we'll risk it, and we'll try to be our best of all kinds of Jews. And it doesn't matter what they have on their head when they're davening or not davening, and on their shoulders when they're davening or not davening, and whatever it is. And so I try my best to see and to speak, not to be shy. People speak. And to just talk to them and say hello and how are you, and that breaks barriers. And I'll say one last thing. I'm not going to get to everybody. I'm one person. I don't, I'll speak to a few people in my life. But the feeling is that if I found something special in that person and that person and that person and that person, I can assume that those people who I haven't had I don't overlap with them. They live over here. I'm assuming that they also have something special, again, as I said, and I try my best to shoot in that direction.
1,000%. And I think that the story that you just gave with Rav Kook about going to Gehenna for loving Jews, that is a CW story right there. If I had to put a title on that one, honestly.
Used correctly in context. Yes, mamish.
That was my first practical usage of that, so I feel good,
Great. Super.
Speaking about CW, and you said that's what you tell your Talmidot, and this brings me to my next thought, is that obviously we're talking about loving every Jew and something that we're struggling with and we're trying to work on and get better at. Is this something that you weave into your teaching style at Sha'alavim Froman when you're with your students, like the whole concept of Ahavat Yisrael?
Yes. I think that every teacher, whatever you're teaching at whatever age, somewhere, even by accident, the you has to come out in your teaching, or else you're not teaching. I don't need you, then I could just do it in AI. And so things that you're working on, things that you're struggling with, things that you struggled with, things that you particularly think are important, that comes out, I think, in every teacher's teaching, and mine too. I do very much try to speak about that. We have this program project in Sha'alavim for women, but it's everywhere. We're one seminary, but everyone does something like this. It's based on a Dvar Torah. Very, very quickly, Rav Soloveitchik, Rav Yosef Dov Soloveitchik from Yeshiva University, died in 1993, has an idea very quickly about why Noach wasn't successful in bringing even one person into the Teva. He was working in his garage for 120 years. Not a single person, he wasn't successful in bringing in a single person to save them from the Teva, of course, except for him and his family, but nobody else. And everyone wants to know how and why, and Rav Soloveitchik understands, because it goes to the sign that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the world after the Mabul, after the flood, was the Keshet, the Keshet Be'anan, the rainbow. And there's a lot of different ideas. Everyone has an idea. And Rav Soloveitchik says that a rainbow, of course, is a multitude, an infinite number of colors, and also it shines even in the clouds. And that's the job of a Jew, and it was the job of Noach to see the colors in every Jew. And he only saw the clouds. He didn't see the rainbow. And had he seen the rainbow, he would have... I don't need to save you because you're not special. You're not worth saving. But had he seen the special quality in each person, then he would have worked harder to save them. And so we have this idea called the Noach Challenge, where you literally make a list, a short list of things you learn from every person in seminary. Every person is meaningful, and if you haven't seen that, then you haven't spoken to them enough. And that's, again, we're one seminary. There are a lot of great seminaries, and everyone does something like this. We call it the Noach Challenge, to see the beauty in the rainbow and the colors in every Jew. And so that's one thing, but there's a lot of, it comes in a lot of times when we all teach.
That was another great vort, and yeah, like sometimes you don't want to be that person that's just focusing on the clouds, because if you do, at the end of the day, it's not good for you and for everybody else around you. And talking about every other seminary, and this channels me into my next thought perfectly, is that we were discussing this before we came on, and something that people don't necessarily realize when they see the space in Israel with all the different yeshivot and seminaries, but specifically seminaries in this context, is there's so many different schools. People think that there is not a lot of cohesiveness with all the heads of the schools, all the different schools together in terms of how they work together. And I think it's something so special. I think you're the perfect person to kind of shed a little bit of light on this. So take me through a little bit of the inside of, there's a real Ahavat Yisrael in a certain capacity between all the seminaries and how they work together. So talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. There's a lot of great seminaries. They're all great. Actually, if I could, one of the things that I also share is that I do work for Sha'alavim. I'm blessed to work for Sha'alavim, but I work for Sha'alavim second, and I work for Klal Yisrael first. And if you work for Klal Yisrael first, some people expect me to say, well, the greatest seminary in the history of the world is Sha'alavim, and everybody else is terrible. And that's so foolish and wrong. If you work for Klal Yisrael first, then the trick is to help everybody find the place that's best for them. And so, yes, there is a natural competition among and between the seminaries. I have to tell you, it's not surprising to us on the inside, because we see it literally, this is no exaggeration, every single day. But to an outsider, it can be very surprising to hear that the competition is very healthy. It's very honest and emes-dik, and the cooperation among the seminaries is stellar. It's a hidden Kiddush Hashem. I am, without any question, I have no doubt that me personally, but we collectively wouldn't survive if we didn't have the WhatsApp groups and the emails and the meetings to help each other. Sometimes it's a joke. Sometimes it's, literally on WhatsApp, a visa question. A student whose father is Israeli, but she doesn't have a passport, what do we do? And certainly, there's none of us would have survived COVID. I don't mean medically. I mean, the seminaries would not have survived COVID, would not have survived the war in the last couple of years, certainly last June, remember with Iran. We would not have survived. We wouldn't have survived had we not had this incredibly healthy camaraderie. It's a huge Kiddush Hashem. I can't even say more. It's enthusiastically excited to share this Kiddush Hashem. That everybody recognizes that you're a great seminary, and you're a great seminary, we're a great seminary, and we have to help our students find the place that's best for them. It's extraordinary. As I said, it's an unfortunately hidden, but it's certainly a Kiddush Hashem.
It's so true, and I obviously I only know it on a certain level, because I've only seen it on a certain extent, like everybody else has. But do you have any other specific? You've been working in Sha'alavim for 20 years, so do you have any moments that you could think over the past 20 years of wow, that is a perfect example of how these schools work together, and that hidden way that people wouldn't find out? Yeah,
I said already. COVID. I don't want to exaggerate, but there must have been. I don't even know. 100 texts a day, 100 WhatsApps a day on the group of how to get a person in the country, out of the country. They got the test, they didn't get the test, they're not allowed to, and if you knew the answer, so you helped. It's very easy. I want to say in parentheses, some people say in the real world. This is the real world. The world of Torah, the world of Midos, the world of people striving for truth. That's the real world. But in the other world, imagine two Wall Street firms, helping each other, keeping clients. And I'm sure I'm wrong to some degree. Certain people are certain stars, but I'm talking from at least externally. It seems, one business helping another business. I can't imagine, Coca-Cola helping Pepsi keep their market share. I could be wrong, but I don't think I'm so wrong. And in the world of the seminary, and I'm sure yeshivas also, but I only know the seminaries. In the world of seminaries, we literally couldn't have existed. I have a student who can't come into the country because she has only gotten one shot. She's supposed to get two. I'm talking about a few years ago during COVID. And another seminary easily could have texted that girl and say, well, your seminary can't get you in, but we can. Come and you go. Not one single story like that. The opposite. And also during the war, especially this past June, and the miracles, but a lot of people had to get home for a wedding, for whatever it was, helping each other. We hear about this flight that's available. I mean, those to me are the most blatant, and they're not one story. They were literally for years, and even now, b'chazdei Hashem, things are quieter. Even now, our WhatsApp groups light up with suggestions. Does anybody have a suggestion for a Lag BaOmer program? When are you ending? We're making the calendar. When is your year ending in June 2027? Whatever. It's not one story. As I said, it's not even dozens of stories. It's, without exaggeration, hundreds of stories over the years of just beautiful camaraderie. By the way, there is the joint application that many seminaries sign on to. I think it's 18 seminaries by now. That also was a work of achdus. You ask a student, you're applying to 3 seminaries, let's say, so you have to fill out 3 forms and 3 different schedules, and I could apply to seminary A. I could get into seminary A before I even apply to seminary B, and seminary A says, well, you got to tell me by tomorrow or else, and then I got to decide. Nothing like that. The opposite. Let's make it easier for them. Let's make a joint application for them. I will say Yeshiva University has been very helpful in being one of the umbrella organizations that really help coordinate us. And yes, there are disagreements sometimes. We're humans and we have different opinions and we have different seminaries that we're running, and that's okay. Agreeing more or less to certain timetables. And, I'm heading to this school on the 17th. Oh, but you're also going to be there? Okay, I'll try to make it the 18th. Not one story and not dozens, but literally hundreds, maybe by now thousands, literally, of stories of people working together. I kind of want to yell that as loud as I can to our students. And I do tell my students, and when I speak in camps in the summer, I usually say that as well. I think it's important for our students to know that, yes, we run seminaries, and yes, we teach in seminaries, and yes, we want students, but we also work with each other. And I think it's important for them to know, and the parents to know, that the people that work in these beautiful places.
It's really an entire world that people don't even know about, as you're saying. And my other thought is, like, I know, for example, I've heard in the past where sometimes you have X number of seminaries. Let's say you say 18 that are part of the joint seminary application. And then you have, too many girls essentially for the spots that are there, and then some girls don't get into seminaries. And then do the schools ever communicate that internally of what can we do to make sure every girl gets in the place that they're supposed to be?
Thank you for reminding me, because that's another example of working together for Klal Yisrael. Literally, I no exaggeration. First of all, in terms of other seminaries opening up. You would think, again, I can't imagine that Coca-Cola, and Pepsi, would communicate to see, I'm trying to think of a third soft drink, Snapple to come in. Yeah, come with the market share. Come to the market share. How can we help you? But we do see that in seminaries. People help. We reach out to the people who are opening these places, who are needed, and how can we help? And here's the calendar, and what and we'll get texts back saying, what do you do about, or do you mind sharing your thinking about this? And I mean, to the best of my knowledge, people are giving, people are helpful, to the best of my knowledge, and I think it's really special. And Hodul Hashem Ki Tov. There are so many people who want to come to Israel. Think about what it was like 30, 40 years ago. Not everybody went to Eretz Yisrael. And nowadays, many, again, I'm sure guys too, a lot of the young women want to come to Eretz Yisrael, and there's not enough beds. And so we do communicate with each other. We try our best to find a place for every girl who applies to the appropriate seminaries, who gets proper guidance, and we hope, the goal is that everybody has a place. And we talk, and by the way, there are girls in every seminary today that don't know They're in seminary A. They don't know that they were originally not accepted to seminary A. The high schools heard before she did. And the high schools will say, well, this young lady, an amazing girl, she applied to seminary A, B, and C. Not a single one of those seminaries accepted her. What can we do? And there are girls today in seminaries, in every seminary in Israel, to the best of my knowledge, where they didn't get accepted at first. And seminary A said, we do have an extra bed and we think we can take her. And she comes in and no one knows. The high school knows, the seminary knows, but she herself doesn't know, her friends don't know, and they usually do very beautifully in that seminary. And it is really nice communication. We can't always solve every single problem, and we just can't make up beds either. And that's why sometimes there's new seminaries that need to open. And the healthy competition makes us all better. Here comes a new place and they're doing this. Oh, that's something we maybe want to try as well. We're working for Klal Yisrael together. I'll just say very quickly, it's so funny because everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, I don't know, but it seems to me that most people in whatever thing they're working in, law, medicine, whatever they're working in, they know their world and they don't necessarily know beyond. And there's not a lot of necessarily, communication. And so it's very helpful to be able to bounce ideas, especially teaching can be very isolating, who talks to each other. So again, we can't always succeed. We can't always work out, but to hear another idea and to say, what, we hopefully are humble enough to say, that's an interesting idea. Let's work together to make us all better. And that really happens all the time.
Wow. And it's interesting because what you said a second ago is how you'll have a situation where a girl applies to the specific schools. Then the high school in America finds out before, and then they help to get the girl in without anybody knowing. Talk about that a little bit too. Like, what's the relationship between schools in Israel and the institutions in America?
Yeah. So everybody's different. Every seminary is different. Every high school is different, and there's different relationships. But in general, I will say again, I hope that we all remember and try to remember that we're working for all of us. And, as I was going to say before, I forgot, but that, they all go to the same high school. They all go to, various colleges. We're all on the same team in the high schools. We're all on the same team in colleges. But for 1 year, we play color war. My seminary is better than yours, and your seminary is better than mine. And it's so ridiculous. And the high schools understand that. We understand that really we have to work together to help them. And so high schools do. They'll say, this girl didn't get into any of her seminaries. The high school may send an email to the 3 seminaries she applied to. And she said, ladies, gentlemen, someone's got to take this wonderful woman. And it's not always successful. And certainly the high schools have a healthy goal to get every one of their students into one of their top choice seminaries. And sometimes it can get a little, challenging. How come you're not? And what do you think? And it can be a little challenging, but it's always respectful. And they do their best to explain to us why we should accept their students. We know them from a file, and we know them from 20 minutes of an interview, and we know them from speaking to letters of recommendation. They've known them for 4 years or longer, and we must rely on them to help us understand who this person is. We don't think she's going to work. No. You don't know her so well. Maybe in the interview she was a little bit embarrassed or nervous, and maybe in this, but really she's this kind of person. So there's great trust. Again, I don't want to stick my head in the sand. It's not always an easy conversation to have. It doesn't always end, of course, in success. If it did, there would be no new seminaries opening. Why do you need a new seminary? So it's not always, flowers and but it's not always beautiful and special, and it's challenging. But at the end of the day, it's a lot of working together, only working together to help these students.
I'm so glad you touched on that point of sometimes you'll have seminaries that talk with a high school in America, and the high school in America knows the student because they've seen him for 4 years, and the seminary meets him for a 20-minute interview. And I did a podcast last year with my wife on guidance in terms of picking a seminary. And one of the things I said is that just because you don't get accepted to a school in Israel doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means that they probably didn't, necessarily get to know you enough. Like, do you have anything to touch on that?
Oh my gosh, it's easy for us, you and me, it's to say that. And I think that these students will agree with this idea down the road. But the minute you get, and I hate using this word because we don't use this word, but I think they do see it, this way. So again, I don't like the word, but once they get rejected from their dream school, so I'm not just rejected from the dream school, I'm rejected. I'm not good enough. I'm not special enough. And it is devastating. And it's very painful for us. It's a very challenging job to not be able to accept everybody. But I would agree with you 100%. I love the seminary year. I work in it. It's my whole professional life and a lot of my spiritual life. But it's not. And I'll say I also love the seminary that I work in, and I think it's outstanding, like the other outstanding seminaries, like all outstanding seminaries. Having said that, there's other schools. There's other schools, and I would say that about any seminary that you don't get into. It's easy to say. It's easy for me to say, but at some point to internalize the idea that life really goes on. And we also have to believe HaKadosh Baruch Hu guided this process for some reason or another. We don't always get what we want. We don't always get what we think we want. I quoted Rabbi Soloveitchik before. I'll quote him one more time. He said that when he was a younger man, his father, Rav Moshe Soloveitchik, I said Rabbi Feinstein before? Rabbi Soloveitchik. Rav Moshe Soloveitchik, his father, went from Eastern Europe to New York to try out to become the Rosh Yeshiva of YU. I believe it was 1929, I'm not positive. And Rabbi Soloveitchik at the time was learning beautifully at home in Berlin, if I'm not mistaken. And he says that he davened to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, please don't let my father get this job. Please don't let me, and of course he got the job, and Rabbi Soloveitchik, I believe it was his wife and one young child, eventually moved to America. I would think it was 1931 by that time. It was a desert of Torah, nothing. And he said, I davened to Hashem, and Hashem didn't listen. How come? And then he said, looking back on my own personal success as Rabbi Soloveitchik, I don't think he used that word, but his growth in Torah, his growth in New York, and not only that, but look what happened to the Jews of Eastern Europe. And he said, I thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for not listening to my tefillos. He knows what's best for me. So that seminary that you really want to get into is an outstanding seminary, and we can't deny that. But the other one is also outstanding. And for some reason, it didn't work out. And it's going to be on you to make it work. It's going to be on you. I love the school that I work in. They're great. But we're only one school. We're not perfect. We're humans. And it's a school run by humans, for humans, which means it's going to be fallible by definition. It's okay. I would even recommend, if you don't mind, rewinding a little bit about choosing where to apply. Talk to your Israel guy. If you come from if I could talk to the students who are thinking about seminary, if you go to a high school that has a good Israel guidance program, talk to them. They know us and they know you better than anybody. And also talk to the people, not only who are in the seminary, but people who were in the seminary. They know the whole year, they know the whole process, they know how they connect with alumni. And one piece of advice that I would share, if it's okay, is that if you're thinking about Seminary A, so speak to the people in Seminary A about Seminary A. And if you're thinking about Seminary B, speak to the people in Seminary B about Seminary B. If I ask a person in Seminary A, tell me about Seminary B. Sometimes people ask me, I'm representing Sha'alavim for women, and they ask me about another seminary, let's say. How are you different? So my answer is, it's an amazing seminary. I love the people that work there. It's an outstanding place. Great girls who come, great girls who leave, who finish. But I'm talking to a 12th grader. You know that seminary better than me. I haven't been to their presentation in 30 years. You've been there 2 days ago. And talk to people there. But if I'm talking to a girl in Seminary A, tell me about Seminary B. Well, she chose not to go to Seminary B. So it's almost, by definition, inviting her to say something negative. Well, Seminary B is good, but it doesn't really have, I don't want to hear that. If you tell me what's great about your seminary, I'll talk to her about what makes her seminary great. But again, there's a lot of pieces of advice, but it goes back to this idea of achdus and seeing the positive. And also, and if you don't get in, that'll help you also recognize that's a great seminary, and that's a great seminary, and that one, and that's also can be amazing for you.
That was really great advice, especially the story that you said about Rabbi Soloveitchik of how he thanked Hashem for that his tefillos were not answered, because sometimes
Imagine.
it's one of the hardest things to do. And then obviously you say hindsight is 2020, so you're able to say that,
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, as we're ending off this podcast, I have to finish off with my final question, and I'm so excited to hear your answer on this one. And this is it could be related to the topic we discussed today, or it could be anything else. For anyone that's listening to this podcast at whatever stage they're at in life, no matter who they are, if you had one message that I told you this is a message in a bottle that they'll keep with them for the rest of their life, what would that be?
Message in a bottle. Wow. Yeah, where do you start? I would share one idea, if I had to. You go to a deserted island, you're only allowed to bring one piece of advice. This is very strict carry-on rules. I would share, not my own idea, I would share the advice of the Sefer HaChinuch. The Sefer HaChinuch in a number of places says, Acharei ha'peulot nimshachim halavavot, that we understand that when I feel something that usually drives me to do things, that we understand. If I love chocolate, I'm going to go buy chocolate and eat chocolate. I love it, and so I do it. But what he brought and shared with us, and he says it's the secret, or a secret to growth, is it also works in reverse. Acharei ha'peulot nimshachim halavavot, that it works in reverse. That if I want to feel something, then I have to just start doing it. I hate to say this, but Nike has it right. Just do it. And I would really recommend, whether it's the topic we spoke about today, if it's Ahavat Yisrael, go grab somebody and say, how are you? A Jew that you haven't met yet. Maybe make it a goal once a day to talk to a Jew you haven't said hello to yet. I'll share really quickly. There's a Gemara in Maseches Tainis that Rabbi Broka met Eliyahu Hanavi. And he was in the shuk, and he wanted to know who in the shuk, who in this marketplace is going to Olam Haba. So Eliyahu Hanavi pointed to one person, and there's that beautiful story. And then he came back to Eliyahu Hanavi, and he said, is there anybody else? And he pointed to those two people over there, and he said, those two people are going to Olam Haba. And he runs over to them, and he says, what do you do? What makes you special? Which again, I think is exactly this idea. What makes you special? Why? And they said, Inshei baduche anan. We bedicha. We are happy. We make people happy. And we, if people are sad, we bring them smiles. And if there's a fight, chas v'shalom, we bring peace. And this is my guess. I don't know for sure. They didn't take a course in that. They didn't get a PhD in humor. They just, I'm assuming they followed Acharei ha'peulot nimshachim halavavot. I want to love them. I'm going to go out and do something for them, nice for them. But it's everything. You want to love davening? Follow the Shulchan Aruch and run to shul. At least the last part of shul, the last part of your walk. You want to be a bit better giver? Start giving. Again, I'm talking to myself. You're welcome to eavesdrop if you like. I would suggest that. I think that's really a key for growth.
That was really, really beautiful advice, and I have to look at Masechtas Tanis again because I've learned it before and I don't remember that story. So
if I'm not mistaken, Chavbez and Alpha, if I'm not mistaken.
There we go. So if anybody else wants to look it up, go for it and check it out. Okay, that is basically a wrap for our conversation. I just have to say you are awesome, and this conversation was phenomenal, and I really think that there's just so much to take from this, and in terms of people growing in their Ahavat Yisrael, and people also understanding the intricacies of the relationship between seminaries and high schools and whatnot. This was awesome. So as I started with Hakar Satov, I'm going to end with Hakar Satov and just say thank you so much for joining me, and I really, really appreciate it.
I really thank you for the opportunity, and I appreciate this, and I appreciate your podcast in general. I'm a follower. I'm a fan. Keep doing what you're doing. You're using your kochos, as we all must, to bring Ahavat Yisrael to the world in this way and through this medium. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu should bless you with a long, long time and good health and good energy to be able to continue doing that.
Amen. Awesome. Thank you, Rav.
Kol Tuv.
That is a wrap for this week's episode with Rabbi Goldsmith. And I just have to say, as I mentioned in the intro, he is awesome. His energy is just so contagious. And I'm just so grateful that he was willing to take the time to sit down with me and also to shed a little bit of light on Ahavat Yisrael and also the relationship between the different seminaries. And if there was one takeaway from this episode that I personally take for myself, is that at the end of the day, we need to try as hard as we can to learn about the other Jews around us, to have conversations with them. And once you do that, ultimately your vision and your view on them will most likely be shaped in a positive way. That's my takeaway for today for my episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you guys next week. All the best.